Hello everybody, welcome back to my little corner of the internet where I will talk about the stories of my life, my work both as a comic book author and a translation, my cats Hey Hey and Serengeti, and the occasional movie, book or TV series review and recommendation, as well as some rants if the feeling hits. While doing some research for the last video, I was reminded of one particular trope that I both love and hate. Love, because when it's well done, it can have an amazing emotional punch for readers and viewers, but I hate it, especially in American comic books, because 9 out of 10 times it will be undone when a new writer comes in and forget about what was done before. What trope am I talking about? Well, you saw the thumbnail, and it's the villain redemption. Now, as I said, I love a good villain redemption arc, and many redeemed villains are among my favorite characters. I will be honest, the only reason why I'm about to watch Stranger Things Season 2, bit late I know, is because Steve got sort of redeemed in the last episode and suddenly the whole series became a little bit more interesting to me. And we can count a ton of characters who started evil and villainous, but a few chapters later they became good and have stayed good. Vegeta, Piccolo, the Dark Moon Sisters, Greed in the Fullmetal Alchemist manga, for example. Black Widow, Hawkeye, most of the time Scarlet Witch, most of the time Quicksilver, just to name a few. And those characters are great. But sometimes, again, especially in American comic books, an amazing redemption arc which ends with the villain maybe not becoming a hero, but at least cleaning up their act or becoming a friend of their former arch-nemesis can be undone in a single panel or a single line. And today, well, I'm going to rant about that. So get a cup of your favorite coffee blend or tea, and let's talk about the comic book villains who got the redemption undone unfairly. One of the problems with superhero comic books, especially the ones coming from the big two, is that because they have gone for more than 50 years, status quo is king. Yes, we fans make a lot of noise about continuity and how the characters have grown in time, but sooner or later they all hit a ceiling that the company won't let them cross. And if said ceiling is broken, a lot of the changes that this brings will be undone either when a new writer comes in, especially if said writer grew up with the comics before the change, or whenever a new big event needs some consequences. I will give a few non-villain examples so you know what I mean. During the original Crisis on the Infinite Earths, Barry Allen, Flash 2, died. His death was a very impactful ending for the character that resonated through the whole DC universe and in fact inspired his Rogue Gallery, a group of villains who only fought him and had a very strict code of conduct, to reform. And then his former sidekick, Kid Flash, Wally West, became the third Flash and was the Flash from 1985 to 2008, in stories that allowed Wally to grow from the somewhat irresponsible Kid Flash to a family man with 2 kids, a wife, a growing list of allies including some former Flash roles like the Pit Piper and the Trickster. In fact, one of Wally's greatest strengths as a character was his ability to turn former foes into allies, and that was very interesting. But in 2008 came Final Crisis, and Geoff Johns, a writer who has said that he loves the classic characters, undid all that. He brought back Barry, which pushed Wally to the sidelines and made it easy for DC to disappear him for the Rebirth relaunch. While that was not a popular take and no Wally has come back, Barry is still around, so pretty much all of Wally's growth has been undone. And he has also suffered character assassination due to Heroes in Crisis, but that's a rant for another day. On the Marvel side, we have the very controversial and hated One More Day. See, Peter Parker had always been allowed to grow, from shy, nerdy teenager to young adult with a ton of responsibilities besides caring for his perpetually dying aunt and paying rent. But after Gwen Stacy's death, he started dating Mary Jane Watson. And in 1987, under the pen of David Michelin and Jim Shooter, and art by Paul Ryan, inks by Vince Coletta, and letters by Rick Parker, colors by Bob Sharon, and editing by Stan Lee, Peter Parker and Mary Jane finally tied the knot in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 21. For years, this was the status quo. Peter, Spider-Man, having a loving and supportive partner who was not a damsel in distress, as in more than one occasion MG proved that she could fight her way out of any problem that was sent her way. Well, with the exception when she was kidnapped by a stalker, but I digress again. This was completely undone in 2007 Notice a trend? That's when the writers who grew up with the 70s versions of the characters became pros in positions to make those changes. When Mephisto, of all people, asked for Spider-Man's marriage to be undone from history in order to save Aunt May from a mortal bullet wound. The fact that absolutely no one else in the Marvel Universe could heal a human from a bullet wound has been mocked to death and back. Also, the question of why Mephisto, a villain who had never had anything to do with Spider-Man, would want a marriage dissolved has never been answered. And well, now Mephisto is a regular Spider-Man villain, and oh my god, it's a mess. So now Spider-Man is again single. Well, sort of. Because after Doc Octopus' stint as Peter Parker, long complicated story, and another villain redemption arc that was completely undone after, Peter and Mary Jane started dating again. Just dating, not marriage, and there is little change from how they used to be when they were married. Because, of course, now the people who were fans of the marriage and their dynamic as a couple are getting more power and voices, and while the wedding is still undone, at least the love is still there. Yes, hey, heroes have a big advantage in this game. The status quo may be king, but some character growth is always allowed more or less, which is why, despite undoing Peter's marriage, he is still an adult with adult worries and not a teenager as he was at the beginning of his career. And Clark Kent has been allowed not to just marry Lois, and all attempts to undo that have gone like kryptonite and lead balloons with the public. But not just that, he also has a kid with her. My feelings about said kid not important right now. Villains, they get the short end of the stick because they are usually stuck in a one-note role that doesn't really allow for any growth unless a very good writer sees a change to write something better with them. Or they become popular enough with the public that the powers that be decide that they want to give them their own book where they can really still be villainous if you want to keep an ongoing series and not, have the hero have to throw them in jail all the time. Let's talk about the main example we have right now. The former textbook example of Stockholm Syndrome, Harley Quinn. When Harley was first introduced, she was strictly the Joker's sidekick. She was infatuated by him, and depending on the writer, he sort of tolerated her or he actually encouraged her. But him having feelings for her was actually a rare thing, and would do anything he asked from her, very rarely going solo. In the animated series where she came from, she grew a bit out of it by becoming friends with Poison Ivy, but she never actually broke up with him on the TV series, nor in the comics based on the same. However, the problem began when Harley was introduced to the actual comics. Because see, in the animated series, the Joker never actually killed anyone except for one man in Mask of the Phantom before he even met Harley. He was evil, yes, but cartoon evil. This is not the case in the comics where the list of murders he has committed includes one of the Robins. So of course Harley had to be equally evil and participate in the same atrocities. And then, because she was popular, they finally decided to let her cut ties with her toxic, abusive boyfriend and put her into the Suicide Squad, which is a team of villains working as heroes under duress. And it worked well enough that, with the exception of the mention that at some point Harley managed to get bombs in every house of Gotham City as Christmas gifts, which it's hard to forgive as that is attempted mass murder, she has never been that villainous again. Which is a common problem with Harley Quinn, by the way. I mean, her new animated series is fun and all, but it's kind of weird seeing her as hero curious when in the first season she was threatening Gotham with a nuke, one of her crew constantly chomps people in half, another is a war criminal, and yet another is a known rapist. Why the series decided to start with her as a bad guy when even in the comics, the second she breaks up with the Joker, she starts trying to be better, I really don't know. But the Harley case is very similar to Venom's. Despite some slips here and there, they have established themselves as anti-heroes, if not full heroes, and thus they remain sort of redeemed. Hell, in the case of Venom, it goes double for the symbiote and Eddie, as when the symbiote was with Flash Thompson, he was 100% heroic and didn't go back to his let's eat bad guys tendencies until later on. And again, while the Spider-Man's comics, especially those of the Todd McFarlane era, made Venom into pretty much a serial killer, later it was justified in he only kills bad guys now, so it's okay, or well, it's not Eddie Brooks, so it doesn't really count, when someone decided that the best use of the symbiote was to give it to the original Scorpion. In that era, we have the strange situation where Eddie had redeemed himself and stopped being a supervillain, but the symbiote hadn't, and it will be a while before it did. However, as I said, both Harley and Venom are very special cases because they are popular with the readers, possibly more as anti-hero vigilantes than they were as villains, so their redemptions get to stay, sort of, until the next reboot where they, well, start villainous again for enough time for another writer to take a stab at their redemption arc again. Yes, it is repetitive, yes, it happens a lot. Minior villains. Less popular villains who get the redemption because a writer saw a chance to write a good story with them, they don't always get that chance. And here we have two very good examples who also happen to be two of my favorite written villains who urgently need writers who respect them more. The first one is Hartley Rathaway, also known as the Pit Piper, and, well, actually most of his friends in the group of villains known as the Rogues. I have talked about them before, but the Rogues were like a League of Evil, dedicated just to fight the Flash. It was originally formed by Captain Cold, who is usually the leader, the original Mirror Monster, Gorilla Groot, Pit Piper, the Weather Wizard, the Trickster, Captain Boomerang, the Top, Abracadabra, Heatwave, the Golden Glider, and the Rainbow Rider. While the group has changed configurations, these were the original ones from the Silver Age, who among their roles had that they did not accept legacy members unless the previous rogue using that name was actually dead, and that the legacy proved themselves to be worth of the name. Also, they never killed, period, and none of them used drugs. So they were very ethical rogues. And after Barry Allen, their original Flash died, was killed during the crisis of the Infinity Earth, many of them, including the Pit Piper, the Trickster, the Top, and Heatwave, decided to change their ways, pay for their crimes, and reform. Specifically, the Trickster became an FBI agent, Heatwave went and joined the Cadmus Project as a guard, and Pit Piper became Wallace West, the third Flash friend, and sort of sidekick, always ready to use his own mastery to help the Spitzer and his family. Their friendship was so strong that Wally was the first person that Hartley came out to, and Wally was happy to ask Hartley to babysit his kids and even help him train his great-grandson Bart Allen. Until some writer decided that the Justice League had used Satana to mind control certain villains, including Dr. Light and the Top, into becoming less competent or downright heroes. And the Top, having become a hero, tried to do the same to the other rogues to make them heroes too. And besides this being incredibly complicated and absurd, it made it as if every choice made by Hartley and the others just didn't count, because it was mind control. This was not very popular, and in fact, undone practically immediately in a way because of all the mind-controlled villains, the only one who managed to remain a hero, thanks precisely to his friendship with Wally, who unmasked himself to make Piper remember the time together, was Piper. They still used him as a sort of a villain for about 1 year later, when he was almost killed and Trickster was killed, but then DC decided to reboot their whole continuity, and everything I just said, which is again incredibly complicated, no longer counts. Hell, for a long time, Wally wasn't even existing in the New 52, so he could not be friends with Piper. The good news is that at least Hartley was allowed to remain heroic in the New 52, and gay, and is now the boyfriend of the director of the crime lab of Central City, but his role as Flash friend is pretty much lip service now, because A, the Flash is Barry Allen, not Wally West, and B, well, this really hurts because that was an integral part of his redemption. And he still got it better than, say, every other rogue who just went evil again because reasons. On the Marvel side, I was thinking about talking about Craven because Craven got an incredible redemption arc in the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. But I believe that a most tragic example is Flint Marko, aka the Sandman. After being one of Spider-Man's most famous and constant enemies from the beginning, Marko had a change of heart. Well, first it was a change of elemental state, because he was accidentally mixed with another Spider-Man's villain, Hydro-Man, into a mud thing with no brain functions. When they had finally separated, Marko started rethinking his life choices because, well, once you end up as a mud thing, you have really hit rock bottom. And it was not even Peter Parker the one who helped Marko to straighten his ways. Instead, it was the ever-loving blue-eyed thing, Ben Grimm, who not only convinced him to become a good citizen, but also to use his powers for good. And Marko did. He turned his life around so much that he not only became a constant ally to Spider-Man, but also to Silver Sable and her mercenaries, a special group of Spider-Man's ex-villains called the Outlaws, and after getting a presidential pardon for his crimes, he actually became an Avengers Reserve member. That's how far Sandman went in his reformed ways. Until, once again, he wasn't reformed anymore. Suddenly, and with no real explanation, he turned against Spider-Man and the Thing, working again with the Wizard to do evil. And not only that, but he also claimed that one of the reasons he had turned back to being evil was because he just couldn't cope living with the side of the angels. This after years of showing that Marko had a nice support system, a group of friends, and was actually getting better every day. Sure, Marvel retconned that into, well, the real cause of Sandman becoming evil again was that the Wizard had brainwashed him into being evil, which, okay, at least he didn't do it on his own volition, but the fact remains that ever since then, Sandman is still a villain. A tragic one who from time to time wishes things would be different and wants to die, but still a villain. Because apparently, unless you are popular, once you're a bad guy, you will always be a bad guy, and isn't that a horrible message to send out in the world? Redemption arcs are important because, well, if you believe in human nature, you know that there are pretty much few things that are unforgivable. One must be ready to accept that once someone has repented and paid for the mistakes, well, they do deserve a second chance. By the way, I mean a second chance from societal norms, as in they get a chance to rejoin society and try to become better now. The people who were hurt by the criminal, directly or indirectly, have no obligation to forgive and forget. While of course in real life this brings a lot of caveats, which include how horrible the crime was and how repentant the criminal really is. In fiction, we get the advantage of seeing the characters' thoughts and know if they are really sincere or not. The fact that because of the nature of comics, the eternal return to the status quo must, if not all of those honest redemptions are unmade, make them even more tragic, especially if the villain in question has managed to turn completely away from crime, like, say, Otto Octavius when he left Peter Parker's body and made his own career as the superior Spider-Man, learning from his mistakes and learning to be a better person, and I need to do a video about that now that I think about it. What is your favorite redemption arc from a comic? Was it undone or is it still holding? Why did it capture you the way it has? I would love to know your answers to those questions, so please give them to me in the comments below. I want to thank my dear patrons Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, Jessica and Ali Riley, as well as my first supporter Tanya Pineda and Amy Song, who is the greatest human being in the planet and without whom these videos will not be possible. I also want to remind you that if you want to support this and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/Adalisa, written link on description in my link tree, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos, as well as get access to a ton of art and these videos before anyone else. Or you can support me once at Coffee, also linked on my link tree, and you will mention in my next 3 videos. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, and of course, you sharing the links. I also welcome all your questions, feedbacks, and suggestions in the comments below. This was Aralisa Zarate, and well, I will wait for you to join me next time with a cup of your favorite coffee or tea as December grows near, and I talk about another one of my favorite Leslie Nielsen's movies, Airplane. Just remember, the white zone is for loading and unloading of passengers only. Do not park in the red zone.